Good morning, everyone. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Nicole Bell this morning. Nicole is part of Nurai Anatar's expansive network, and that's how we're fortunate to have her here this morning. So I'd like to read just a little bit about Nicole, who is an author and a mom, an engineer, has a very accomplished background. She has written What Lurks in the Woods, Struggle and Hope in the Midst of Chronic Illness. So Nicole is a mom and successful entrepreneur who has advanced her professional career as an engineer and program manager. She became an executive in a fast-growing medical device company where she built a world-class team in surgical robotics. But in 2017, Nicole's husband was diagnosed with a devastating disease, and she was forced into her most challenging roles yet, caregiver and medical proxy. Unsatisfied with the doctor's answers, Nicole set out on a journey using her engineering mindset to search for the root causes of her husband's illness. She eventually found them and sought treatment, a process that changed her and her entire view of modern medicine. Nicole grew up near Boston, earned a bachelor's and master's of science in materials science and engineering from MIT, and a master's of science in biomedical engineering from Duke. She currently joins us from Raleigh, North Carolina, where she resides with 2 children and dogs. So welcome, Nicole. I see you've started to share your screen, and we are very much looking forward to your remarks.
Great. Thank you for having me today. Can everyone see the screen okay? Awesome. Okay, so my story we'll talk about today, and there's lots of different nuances and elements to it, but I decided to spend today talking about getting back up. So lots of times in your life, things are going along either really great or just on some sort of even keel, and then something happens which changes everything. In my case, it was like a big fat baseball bat in the face that caused everything in life to be different. And so the question is when you get challenged with these types of moments, how do you get back up? And how do you move on and kind of repurpose the rest of your life? This is a little, if I can advance, there we go. So, well, oops. Hold on, a little delay on the slides. There we go. So we'll talk a little bit through my journey and the path. And obviously it's our story and I'll share as we go along, but I'm hoping that you can extrapolate things in your lives as well. We'll talk about where I started and kind of what happened and then what we learned along the way and how to go from here. So I guess just starting a little bit with a background about me, which Stephanie already said a little bit of, but I grew up in Massachusetts area, just south of Boston. I'm an engineer, probably to my core. I love to solve problems, and I have engineering background from both MIT and Duke. And I've lived all over the country, so started in Massachusetts, went to California, now in the Raleigh-Durham area, which I love. And my career has been really in 2 phases. So first half of my career, all in engineering, but really focused in the electronics sector. And then mid-career was when I decided to go back to Duke and get my degree in biomedical engineering and actually got into medical devices and first in diagnostics and then most recently in surgical robotics. And so I've run very large programs in technology. I love solving problems. It's just kind of part of who I am and always been a joy. But my story that I want to focus on today is really not about my career or even me for that matter. It's really centered around my family and specifically my husband, Russ. So Russ was also an engineer, very smart. He had this really awesome, amazing mix of right brain, left brain, because he was an engineer by training, but he was also a musician. He was a really avid guitar player. And so that made him super creative. So he actually had, I have a picture there of 24 US patents on his wall. He just had this amazing ability to solve problems and come up with different solutions. And he was also just extremely funny. He brought a lot of joy into my life, and he was 20 years older than I was, but it just didn't seem to matter. We quickly became inseparable and decided to get married and raise a family. And we had our 2 children, Ryan and Haley, shown a little younger than they are now, but they were really a unique opportunity for both of us, but especially for Russ, because he had been married before. He had a daughter. It didn't go so well. And so he saw our family as an opportunity to kind of have a second chance and to do it right. And as part of that, he said, you know, I'm going to step back from my career. I've had a really fabulous journey in startups and in technology, but it's your time to shine. So I want to support you. I'm going to retire early, step back and be Mr. Mom, take care of the kids, and you can focus on your career and also the family and have kind of that dual role. And for me, it was great. It was like, okay, I can have it all, right? I have this beautiful family. I have a supportive husband. I had a really great career going in a medical device company that was thriving and growing. And it felt like everything had fallen into place. But I mentioned a baseball bat, right? Unfortunately, that didn't stay. And so what ended up happening is that over time, Russ started to change. You know, we were engineers and we didn't fight a lot. I know I say that and people say, yeah, whatever, but it was actually true. We would just kind of debate and we would try and get to the right answer. And we also often came out with answers better than either one of us had ever anticipated. But all of a sudden we were fighting all the time. You know, Russ became depressed and moody and irritable, and everything was a battle. And frankly, he was nasty and sometimes verbally abusive, which, you know, when you say all that, it sounds like it's dramatic, but it happened gradually over time. And just like everything in life, you rationalize it. You're like, well, maybe he's not happy being Mr. Mom, and maybe he misses working and the fast pace of his career. And so we rationalized it away and we went to therapy to try and fix it, but it just didn't help. And so then eventually in 2016, I realized it was deeper than just unhappiness. He was starting to have memory lapses. He would forget the code to our security system at the house, which was the same for years. He would forget the time to pick up the kids. And that was when I realized that something much more sinister was at play and that he was sick. And so we started our journey with doctors. And I guess I'll get straight to the punchline. Russ was actually diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's disease. So he was 60 years old, and this was January of 2017. And I was really just figuring out in the past few months that something was wrong. But doctors told me, based upon his PET scan, that he actually was exhibiting late stage disease. So we were just discovering there was a problem and the disease was already well entrenched. And that was, as I said, this ginormous baseball bat. And it was also just really confusing because he didn't have any predisposition to Alzheimer's. He had no genetic markers for the disease. He had no comorbidities, no lifestyle factors, all the things that they say to do to maintain brain health. He was doing it. And so as an engineer, it just didn't make any sense. It didn't fit. And it's like, there has to be a reason. And so we went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and we got nowhere. And frankly, we even got chastised for digging in the first place. And I remember going to one of the leading neurologists in the area, and I begged him, I said, doctor, there has to be a reason that this is happening. And his response to me, I won't swear in the presentation, but his response to me was blank happens. And I was just floored. You know, this is the best that modern medicine had to offer, was basically blank happens. And I felt completely devastated. There's really no other word. And so for a while, we gave up looking for another cause and for what the root cause of his disease was. But by happenstance, we actually ended up figuring it out. And it came from my brother, who called me because his wife had been struggling for years with her own health issues. And they had finally figured out that the cause of her disease was tick-borne. She actually had 4 common infections that are associated with tick-borne illness. And so my brother is a doctor, actually has an office up in the DC area. And he started researching, and he said, you know, Nick, I'm pretty convinced that this is what's going on with Russ. And I told him, I said, I know, actually the first doctor that we went to back in 2016, the first thing I had him tested for was Lyme disease, because Russ was a hunter. He was always in the woods. He lived all over the country in areas known to be endemic with Lyme. And it just seemed to make sense from my research. But that doctor had him tested with the CDC standard recommended method, and he tested negative. But my brother and I talked about how that test method is grossly inadequate. And actually, recent data shows that it's only 29% accurate in some studies for people known to have Lyme disease, 29% accurate. I can't think of another disease or another place where that would be deemed to be acceptable, but that's what you get tested with when you go in for most doctors. And so my brother convinced me to go to a specialty lab, because there are a few that will specialize in Lyme, and get him tested again. And this used a PCR method, just like we use for COVID. And with that, he tested positive, and he eventually tested positive for 3 infections: Borrelia burgdorferi, which is the bacteria causing Lyme, and then Bartonella henselae and Babesia duncani, which are 2 common co-infections. And so 15 months after we first started our medical journey, we found the root of his illness. And I guess we felt vindicated in getting that answer, but at the same time, we had lost a lot of precious time. So what happened? Well, saying it was a roller coaster is really kind of an understatement. We had many ups and downs. We treated him with antibiotics and herbals and holistic medicine approaches for about 18 months. And there were many times that I thought that he would get well. But at the end of the day, his disease was entrenched and we couldn't get ahead of the cognitive decline. And by 2019, I was drowning. I had 2 children that were 5 and 8. I was still working, and he was requiring full-time care, and I was broken. I couldn't survive at this point. And so I made the difficult decision to move him to a resident care facility. And actually, just a couple of weeks ago, he passed away from his illness. And so the story, unfortunately, doesn't end well. And as you can imagine, having gone through all that, right, I went to some dark places. I just felt like a failure. I like to solve problems, and the most important problem I had ever been presented with, I had failed. I wasn't able to get him well. I felt like I was out of control, like nothing I did mattered. And all these questions and all this self-doubt started circling in my head. Why didn't I? How come I didn't? If only I had done this. This is all my fault. All of those negative thoughts just circled over and over again in my brain. And I stayed there for a while, but I had to figure out how to get back up. How to get back up. I had 2 children, 5 and 8, that were staring at everything that I did, and I had to figure out how to get up. And so a question kept circling over and over again in my mind. Who am I? What do I want to be? For my entire life, I had been go, 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 go. I had always had a school or a career or a family or a partner or something that was driving all of my time. But I had the privilege of being able to take a step back and decide what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, because I had been changed in a way that was meaningful, and I needed to take stock of and figure out what I wanted to do with my time left. And so I sat and tried to figure out, what are my core values? What are the things that I hold dear and that define who I am and what I want to be? And that as long as I stay true to that, then I'll be happy with wherever my course takes me. And so I sat down over the course of a couple of days and I wrote down what those values are and specifically how they impact me in my life. And so I want to share those just as an example. So the first one for me is health. And I know a lot of people would say, God or country or service or something that is very true to them. But for me, it's health. And the reason is because of my journey. I realized if you don't have your health, then you can't be in service to anyone else, to yourself, your family, God, your country, anyone, because health, if you don't have it, it can literally take everything away, as it did for us. It took away his personality. It took away everything that he was. And so health is number one. And I see this at a really deep level in terms of not just exercising and eating right, but also really understanding my body at the biochemical level and try to maximize it so that I can be the best possible person that I can. Second is family. So I've had a very successful career, and I've left a lot of jobs along the way, and every single time I've been replaced. But the one job that I can't be replaced in is my role as mom. And so as I take restock of my life, putting my kids and my family first is absolutely the most, is critical for what I want to do next. Third is growth. As part of Russ's illness, I was exposed to so many amazing technologies and learning that I had no idea. And I'm a lifelong learner. I love to read. I love to learn and then share that information with others. And so growth is really important. As part of our journey, I learned all about tick-borne illness, and I learned all about the brain and Alzheimer's disease and holistic health management. And these are areas that I wanted to continue to learn and to figure out how to grow and then share that information with others. Fourth is friends. So the dirty little secret of dementia is that there's a lot of shame that rolls in with it. You know, Russ was a self-made man, very independent. He had built himself from nothing. He was the first in his family to go to college. And as he started to lose a lot of his abilities and a lot of his cognitive capabilities, there was shame, and he didn't want people to see that. And as a result, we isolated ourselves. And also his mood changes also forced us into more isolation. And so as I came out of that, I realized how important friends and that support network and community was to me. And then COVID echoed that point as we lost a lot of that. And so for me, friends and community and that tribe of people that will help me and my family is critical. Number 5 is independence. And this is important not only for financial independence. Obviously, I always want to be able to take care of myself and my children. But this also to me means emotional independence. As part of Russ's journey, that roller coaster of being happy and depressed and angry and anxious and fearful, all of those things, I went on that roller coaster with him. And I wanted to be able to find more emotional happiness from within and not be taken on that roller coaster. And even though Russ's journey is now no longer, part of my daily life, your kids, they take you on roller coasters all the time too. And so I wanted to be able to just find happiness from within and then control my own moods and my own decision-making at a deeper level. And so independence is really important to me. And then finally, there's fun. So every other photo I've shown has just been some stock photo on Google, but this is actually a picture of my daughter when she was a baby. And I just love this picture because she just looks so happy, right? Kids have so much joy and so much love, and there's so much fun. And I think as adults, it gets beat out of us. And, and Russ's illness obviously didn't help keep the fun alive in my family, but I married him because of his fun. He was funny and the joy that he brought to our lives. And I wanted to get that back. And I wanted to make sure I was passing it on to my children. And so fun is last, not because it's least important, but because I want it to permeate everything that we do. And so those are the core values that I came up with to guide me and to really show what I wanted to do next and to inform it. And so a lot of times you hear somebody speak or you go to a seminar and you're really intent about it for a couple of days and then you shove it off in the corner, right? But that's not what this is for me. This is something that I live every day. This is actually memorialized by a wonderful artist on Etsy, and it hangs in my kitchen right next to the dinner table. And sometimes in a lull in the conversation, I'll ask my kids to pick a value and show how they shared that or show how they embodied that value in their day that day. And I don't know if a lot of people here make goals, but when I made my goals for 2022, I looked at my core values and I made sure that everything was in alignment with that. And so it's something that I take with me and that guides me on a daily basis. And so I guess in terms of where to next, the things that I want to do, I want to share our story with people like you all, just to really make sure that our journey and the learning that we had along the way can hopefully help others. I don't want others to have the same outcome that we did. And I believe if you know some of the things that we learned the hard way, then you can have a different ending. And so I want to share that story so that other people's journey ends up in a different way or ends differently. Second, I want to be an advocate. So I have learned that tick-borne illness is at the root of a lot of chronic illness. And I want to change the way that our medical community sees it and the government sees it. And so I want to be an advocate and share our story so that other people won't have to suffer and go as long with the diagnosis. I've met people that have gone undiagnosed for 20 years, and it's really difficult, and it's a lot of suffering that's unnecessary. And then finally, I want to build a solution. So I'm still an engineer at heart, and I see so many things in diagnostics and in holistic health management where we could provide better answers that allow people to find out what's ailing them, to own their own health and wellness, and to understand how their body is doing. And so I want to help use those skills to build a solution that makes things better. So I guess the thought that I'll end with is, this is obviously our journey and very specific to us, but what's going to help you get up? If you have a speed bump or a baseball bat or whatever it is, what do you really truly understand? What are your core values and what guides you, and what's going to help you get back up when that moment comes? And I would encourage you to think about it, not when it comes, but before it comes, so that you have that compass and that guiding light to kind of show you what's important and how you want to live on a daily basis. And so take the time and really introspectively figure that out, because our time on this earth is limited. And so we want to make sure that we're spending it wisely. So that's it. And I'd be happy to take any questions or anything along the way. I can try and get the chat up so that I can actually see it.